Hello, bedtime thinkers, and welcome to the Bedtime Discoveries. I'm so glad you're here tonight, ready to drift gently into a world of wonder and calm. Tonight's journey takes us into a question that feels both magical and scientific. Could we ever build an invisibility cloak? For centuries, people have imagined what it might feel like to disappear, to walk unseen through the world. From ancient myths to modern fantasy books and films, the cloak of invisibility has fascinated our minds. But could such a thing exist in reality? Could science ever make us truly invisible? Before we begin, my friend, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your part of the world. Feel free to share in the comments so we can see how far our little bedtime community has spread. And if you enjoy these calming journeys into science, I gently invite you to like this video and subscribe to the Bedtime Discoveries so that each night you'll have a new story waiting for you. When we think of invisibility today, we might imagine a cloak that makes us vanish, or a character from a book or film who disappears before our eyes. But this dream is not new. It has lived with humanity for thousands of years. In the ancient world, invisibility was already a story told by firelight, a whisper of power, of freedom, of mystery. One of the earliest tales comes from the Greek philosopher Plato. He told of the ring of Gyges, a ring that gave its wearer the ability to vanish from sight, to walk among others unseen, to take what he wished, to act without consequence. But this was more than a story of magic. It was a question of morality. Plato asked, if a person could act without ever being caught, would they still choose to live justly? Or would invisibility reveal the shadows in the human heart? This story reminds us that invisibility has always been more than a trick. It is a mirror reflecting our deepest desires and fears. Beyond Greece, other cultures told their own tales. In Celtic legends, warriors were said to wear cloaks that made them vanish in battle. In Norse myths, magical items allowed gods to move unseen through human lands. And in folk tales from Asia to Africa, trickster spirits often disappeared, leaving laughter or confusion behind. To be invisible was not only to hide, but to slip between worlds, between the known and the unknown, between the safe and the mysterious, between what is seen and what is secret. Even in these earliest stories, invisibility carried two faces. One face was playful, mischievous, liberating. The other face was dangerous, tempting, unsettling. And so the dream of invisibility traveled with humanity through centuries, through cultures, through countless voices, always reshaped, always retold, but always carrying the same question. What would it mean to vanish? As time passed, the stories of invisibility began to grow richer. In medieval Europe, legends told of magical cloaks and helmets, objects woven with spells that could render their owners unseen. One such tale was of the Helm of Darkness, a relic said to belong to Hades himself. When worn, it allowed the god of the underworld to walk unnoticed, even among other gods, silent, shadowed, invisible. Knights and travelers, in the stories of the Middle Ages, sometimes stumbled upon cloaks that concealed them, not always for mischief, sometimes for protection. A knight might use invisibility to escape danger, or to shield a maiden from harm. Here, invisibility became not only a symbol of power, but of safety, of secrecy, of quiet rescue. Fairy tales, told to children before bed, often carried little sparks of invisibility. A young boy might find a magical garment, A girl might be granted the power to vanish by a kindly spirit, and though the tales were simple, they planted seeds of wonder in young hearts. By the Renaissance, invisibility began to mingle with curiosity, as alchemists searched for secret formulas, and scholars studied the hidden forces of nature. Stories of vanishing were told alongside experiments with glass, mirrors, and light. Then came the age of novels, and with it, a deeper, darker imagining. In 1897, H.G. Wells published The Invisible Man. It was not about magic, nor about cloaks woven with spells, but about science. A man, brilliant yet troubled, discovered a way to bend light so that it would pass through his body. His skin, his eyes, his very bones became transparent. He was invisible, not through myth, but through manipulation of nature itself. And yet, his story was not one of joy, for invisibility isolated him. It cut him off from others. It turned his gift into a curse. Wells' story was both thrilling and tragic, and it reminded readers that invisibility is not only about freedom, it is also about loneliness, about losing the human connection that comes from being seen. In the 20th century, invisibility spread into the pages of fantasy novels and the screens of cinemas. From enchanted cloaks worn by wizards, to superheroes who vanished to fight unseen, to science fiction soldiers wrapped in advanced camouflage, the idea blossomed in every direction. Each story carried a slightly different flavor. Sometimes invisibility was playful and adventurous. Sometimes it was terrifying. Sometimes it was bittersweet. And always it stirred the imagination. Why? Perhaps because invisibility is both simple and impossible. A dream that every child can imagine, and yet a puzzle that science struggles to solve. Now, my friend, let us rest for a moment. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine, truly imagine what it would feel like to be invisible, to walk into a room unseen, to explore a forest where no eyes could follow, to listen quietly without being noticed, to vanish into stillness, like a shadow dissolving at dusk. There is something soothing about the idea, the thought of stepping out of the gaze of others, free, unnoticed, unjudged. And yet, there is also something uneasy, for we are human, and to be human is to be seen, to be known, to be connected. If we were always invisible, we might lose that connection. We might drift away from others, into silence, into solitude, into loneliness. This balance is what gives invisibility its power in stories. It is not simply a trick or a tool. It is a question, a dream, a reflection of who we are. When children hear a fairy tale of an invisible hero, they smile. When adults read of invisible villains, they shiver. When philosophers recall the Ring of Gyges, they ponder right and wrong. And when scientists imagine bending light itself, they lean forward with curiosity. The dream of invisibility persists because it is more than a fantasy. It is a mirror for our desires, our fears, our longings for freedom, and our need for connection. And so, invisibility has walked with humanity across centuries. From fireside stories to novels, from myths to movies, always glowing, always alive in our imagination. And now, as we leave the world of stories behind, we step softly, carefully into science. What does invisibility mean, not in tales, but in reality? How does light work? How do our eyes see? And could we ever bend the very fabric of light to make the dream real? That, my friend, will be the next chapter in our journey. Now that we have wandered through the soft landscapes of myths and stories, Let us turn our gaze gently toward the quiet science behind it all. For to understand invisibility, we must first understand light and how our eyes, our minds, and our world depend on it. Light is so familiar to us and yet so mysterious. It is there in every sunrise and every candle flame in the gentle glow of the moon. It is what paints colors across the sky, what reveals faces, books, trees, and oceans to our eyes. Without light, we would live in shadow, in silence, in a world unseen. But what is light truly? Science tells us that light is a form of energy, a wave that travels across the universe at the fastest speed we know, nearly 300,000 kilometers in a single second. And yet, light is not only a wave. It is also made of tiny particles called photons. They are unimaginably small, smaller than anything we can see or even imagine, and yet together they bring the entire world into view. This dual nature of light, wave and particle, is one of the most beautiful puzzles of physics. And it is this very nature that makes invisibility so complex. For to hide something, one must hide it from the endless dance of these waves and particles, the very fabric of vision itself. But let us stay gentle and simply feel the wonder of knowing that every color you see, every page you read, every face you recognize, is because light, tiny and delicate, travels, reflects, bends, and finally touches your eyes. Now let us rest a moment and think softly about vision itself. How do our eyes take in this invisible energy and turn it into images, into meaning, into memory? Imagine a ray of sunlight falling onto a tree. The light strikes the bark, the leaves, the branches. Some of it is absorbed, some is reflected. The reflected light travels through the air until it reaches your eyes. Your eye, though small, is a marvel of nature. At the front, the cornea bends the incoming light. Then the lens focuses it further, so that the image falls neatly onto the retina at the back. The retina is a living canvas made of millions of tiny cells, rods and cones. The rods sense light and dark. The cones sense color, red, green, blue. Together, they capture the patterns of light and send signals through the optic nerve up into your brain. And they're in the quiet folds of the visual cortex. The image is formed, not a painting, not a photograph, but a living, breathing moment of perception. In truth, we do not see with our eyes. We see with our minds. The eyes are only the windows. The brain is a true artist, weaving light into vision. It is a gentle wonder that the whole world we experience, the colors of flowers, the faces of loved ones, the night sky itself, is built from nothing more than waves of light, translated by our eyes and shaped into meaning by our brains. And so, invisibility is not simply about hiding from eyes. It is about tricking this entire process, guiding light so carefully, so perfectly, that the brain receives no clue that anything is there. Now, let us connect softly the science of light with the dream we carry. When we say invisible, what we really mean is that light should travel, as though an object were not there at all. Imagine a stream of water flowing smoothly around a rock. If the rock is small, the water moves gently around it and continues on its way. But if the rock is large, the water ripples, splashes, creates disturbances. The same is true for light. To make an object invisible, we must guide the light smoothly around it without ripples, without scattering. But light is stubborn. It wants to bounce, to bend, to scatter. Every surface, every material, every curve leaves its trace. Even glass, which seems transparent, is not truly invisible. You can see a window pane because it reflects some light, because it bends other light, distorting what lies beyond. True invisibility would mean perfect guidance of light. No reflections, no shadows, no distortions. The light would pass around the object and continue as if nothing had been there. To the eye, to the brain, to the mind, the object would vanish. And this, dear friend, is why invisibility is so difficult. For the science of light is not simple. It is delicate, intricate, and deeply woven into how we see the world. To hide something from vision, one must not only hide it from light, but from the entire dance of perception itself. And yet, this is what makes the dream so enchanting. Because invisibility is not only about cloaks and cloaking, it is about the deep mysteries of light and the quiet marvel of how we see. As you breathe slowly now and let your thoughts drift like soft waves, remember that the science of vision is itself a kind of magic. Every sunrise you have ever seen, every book you have ever read, every smile you have ever cherished, exists because of the gentle, invisible journey of light. And in that journey lies the possibility, however faint, however distant, of one day bending it, shaping it, and creating the cloak of dreams. We have wandered through the old stories of invisibility and then into the soft science of light and vision. Now let us pause gently and ask a quiet but important question. When we say invisibility, what do we mean scientifically? In everyday life, we might think of invisibility as not being seen. But for science, that phrase must be translated carefully, because to not be seen is to not interact with light. Light is the language of vision. When it touches an object, it scatters in every direction. Some rays are absorbed, some are reflected, and those reflected rays reach our eyes, giving the object color, shape, and presence. To make something invisible, then, is not simply to hide it. It is to control the very path of light, so that light does not scatter, does not reflect, does not reveal. In true invisibility, light would flow around an object as though it did not exist, like a river gliding around a smooth stone, leaving the water ahead undisturbed. To anyone watching, it would seem as if the object were never there. This is different from camouflage or disguise. Camouflage makes an object blend into its background, but it can still be seen if you look closely. True invisibility is deeper. It is a complete erasure of presence through the perfect guidance of light. This is what science means when it whispers of invisibility. Not a trick of shadows, not a clever pattern, but a mastery of the fundamental behavior of light itself. Let us step slowly into the physics and imagine together how invisibility might truly work. There are three main ways an object interacts with light. The first is reflection. This is what happens with mirrors or shiny surfaces. Light bounces back, and we see the glimmer, the sparkle. The second is absorption. A dark sweater on a winter's day absorbs sunlight, becoming warm. A black surface absorbs more, while a white one reflects most. The third is transmission. This is what happens when light passes through glass or water. The light is bent or refracted, but it continues its journey. Now, imagine that you want to make an object invisible. Reflection would give it away. Absorption would leave a dark shadow. Transmission might help, but bending would distort the image behind it. What you truly need is something more delicate. You need light to travel, as though the object were never there, to curve smoothly around it, to rejoin on the other side, without disturbance, so that the light reaching the observer carries no clue, no trace, no shadow. This is called cloaking. It is not about blocking light. It is about guiding it. One way scientists imagine this is through a concept called a refractive index. Every material has its own refractive index, a measure of how much it bends light. Water bends light differently than glass. Glass bends it differently than air. And air bends it differently than diamond. To cloak something, one would need a material that could change its refractive index at will, bending light gently, precisely, in just the right way so that it travels around an object like wind around a hill and emerges as though it had passed through empty space. It is a delicate dream because even the slightest ripple or error would give away the presence of the hidden shape. And so, invisibility in science is not about vanishing like a shadow. It is about weaving a path for light so perfect, so seamless, that the eye is never disturbed and the mind never notices. Now let us rest gently and think about invisibility not only as physics, but as perception. To be invisible scientifically is to erase the interaction between object and light. But to be invisible to humans is also to erase awareness. Our brains are remarkable, but also imperfect. We do not always notice everything we see. A person can walk through a crowded street, and many faces will pass unseen, not because they're invisible, but because our attention is elsewhere. So, in some ways, invisibility can be created by distraction, by tricking the brain into looking past what is there. Magicians have long known this. A trick of the hand, a flicker of movement, a glance in the wrong direction, and the audience does not see what is right before their eyes. This is not true invisibility, but it reminds us of something important. Invisibility is not only about physics, it is also about psychology. If a cloak could bend light around a person perfectly, but the cloak created a faint shimmer or a slight distortion, would the observer's brain notice, or would it dismiss the disturbance and accept the illusion of emptiness? The line between scientific invisibility and perceptual invisibility is thin, and it is in this space, between physics and psychology, that the dream begins to feel possible. For science tells us what light does, but the brain decides what we see. And perhaps invisibility lies as much in the mind as in the material. So, when we ask, what does invisibility mean scientifically? The answer is both simple and profound. It means bending the very path of light. It means guiding perception itself. It means erasing not only shadows, but awareness. And in that definition lies the wonder, the challenge, and the dream. We have imagined invisibility in stories, in light, and in science. But to move from dream to possibility, we must speak of something unusual, something called metamaterials. The word itself has a gentle mystery. Meta, meaning beyond, and materials, the stuff of the world. Metamaterials are materials beyond nature. Unlike wood or glass or metal, metamaterials are not found as they are in the earth. They are created, carefully built at a microscopic scale, designed so that their structure, rather than their substance, determines their behavior. To understand this, think of cloth. A single thread of cotton is simple, but weave many threads together in different patterns, and you can create smooth silk-like textures or thick and warm fabrics. The structure creates properties far beyond the fiber itself. Metamaterials work in the same way, but at a scale so tiny, so delicate, that they can control waves of energy, like light and sound. Their patterns are smaller than the wavelength of light itself. And so, to light, they behave in strange and wonderful ways. They can bend light backward. They can make it curve in unusual paths. They can create effects no natural material has ever shown. And it is the gentle redirection of light, that makes metamaterials the first true doorway to invisibility. Let us float deeper into the workings of these special materials. Imagine a pond with ripples spreading across its surface. If you place small obstacles carefully arranged, you can steer those ripples. You can make them flow around a shape, rejoining smoothly on the other side. The water appears calm, as though nothing was ever there. This is what metamaterials do, not with water, but with light. By arranging tiny structures, smaller than light's wavelength, scientists can guide the waves of light to bend, twist, or even flow in circles. One of the most enchanting effects is called a negative refractive index. In ordinary glass, light bends one way. In metamaterials, it can bend the opposite way, as though the rules of nature have been gently reversed. This opens the possibility of cloaking. If light can be bent just right, it can be made to curve smoothly around an object, flowing like a stream past a hidden stone, and then continuing forward untouched, undisturbed. To the eye, the object vanishes, not because it is gone, but because the light that tells us of its presence has been gently rerouted. This is not simple. Metamaterials must be crafted with extreme precision, like weaving an invisible fabric at scales smaller than dust. But when they work, the effect is unlike anything in the natural world. It is as though a magician's cloak had been stitched, not with thread, but with patterns that whisper directly to light itself. Now let us rest gently and think about what this means for invisibility. Metamaterials are not magic. They are carefully engineered, fragile, and often limited. They may work for certain colors of light, but not others. They may cloak a tiny object, but not a person. They may hide from one angle, but not from all perspectives. And yet, they are the first real step. The first time that invisibility has moved beyond imagination and entered the quiet realm of possibility. In 2006, researchers created a metamaterial cloak that guided microwaves around a small object. It did not make the object disappear to the human eye, but to microwave detection, it was invisible. Later, experiments extended this idea to visible light, though only for very narrow ranges and only for tiny microscopic objects. It is as if the first threads of the invisibility cloak have been woven, threads that shimmer faintly in the laboratory, showing us what may come with time and patience. The dream is far from complete, but every cloak must begin with a single stitch, and metamaterials are those first stitches, quietly teaching light to flow where we wish it to go. So, when we ask about the role of metamaterials, the answer is gentle but profound. They are not the cloak itself, but the loom upon which the cloak may one day be woven. They remind us that invisibility is not an impossible dream, but a long, careful journey, where science and imagination walk side by side. Dear listener, let us wander together, softly, into the earliest days of invisibility research. Long before metamaterials became a subject of fascination, scientists were already dreaming of ways to bend light, to hide objects, to test the impossible. One of the earliest approaches was camouflage science, not invisibility in the truest sense, but clever tricks with color, mirrors, and angles. In World War II, military engineers experimented with painting ships in strange, broken patterns. This was called dazzle camouflage. It did not make the ships invisible, but confused the eye, making it harder for enemies to tell their direction or their distance. Later, experiments moved from paint to light itself. Researchers wondered, Could mirrors be arranged to make something vanish? A mirror box can reflect its surroundings, making whatever contains appear less visible. But it is imperfect. The reflections distort, the edges give away the secret. Still, these are the first playful steps, the first whispers of the idea that invisibility might be built, not just imagined. By the early 2000s, scientists began trying more ambitious things. Instead of mirrors, they worked with carefully crafted materials, lenses arranged so that light curved around small space, hiding what was inside. These were called optical cloaks. They worked only for narrow ranges of light, and only at certain viewing angles. But they showed that invisibility was not only for legends. It could be measured, tested, and demonstrated in laboratories. The first gentle steps had been taken, steps that would lead, slowly but surely, to the wonder of metamaterials. Now let us rest and think about one of the most famous early experiments. In 2006, a team of scientists led by David Smith and David Schurig at Duke University built the world's first metamaterial invisibility cloak. It was not a cloak for human eyes. Instead, it worked with microwaves, a form of light, but with much longer wavelengths than what we see. The cloak was a small cylinder, surrounded by rings of metamaterial. As microwaves approached, the cloak guided them around the cylinder and allowed them to continue forward as though nothing had been there. To microwave detectors, the object was invisible. No shadow, no reflection, no disturbance. It was as if the cylinder had melted out of reality. Of course, this cloak had limits. It worked only for one frequency of microwaves. It worked only for 2 dimensions, not 3. And it was large and clumsy, not sleek and wearable. But it was proof that the equations of invisibility could be turned into reality, that light could be persuaded to flow around an object, just as theory had dreamed. For the scientific world, this was a turning point. What had once belonged to fantasy and fairy tales now had an anchor in experiment. The dream of invisibility had taken its first firm step into the light of science. As the years passed, experiments grew more ambitious and more delicate. Some researchers began working with plasmonic cloaks. These used thin metallic films to cancel out the scattering of light. Instead of bending light smoothly around an object, they tried to erase the signature of the object itself. The effect was partial but striking. Others experimented with optical cloaking using lenses. By arranging lenses in careful patterns, scientists could make an object disappear from certain directions. To the eye, it looked as though empty space lay where something truly was. But if you moved aside, the illusion faded. These were fragile successes, moments when invisibility shimmered into existence, then dissolved again when viewed too closely. And yet, with every attempt, the science grew clearer. The dream sharpened, like a painting slowly coming into focus. By the 2010s, researchers even demonstrated cloaking at visible wavelengths. Tiny objects, just a few micrometers across, could be made invisible to specific colors of light. It was not yet a cloak for humans, but it was a promise that invisibility, though still elusive, was no longer only a dream of storytellers. It was now a subject of blueprints, equations, and shimmering laboratory experiments. And as we drift softly here, we can see those early experiments as the fragile dawn of a greater possibility, a dawn that whispers of cloaks yet to be woven and discoveries yet to come. Dear dreamer, until now, we have spoken gently of invisibility, of cloaks, of bending light, of delicate experiments. But there is a quiet challenge hiding in the very nature of light itself. This challenge is the world of wavelengths. You see, what we call light is only a small part of a much greater spectrum. At one end, there are radio waves, long and slow, flowing gently across continents. Then come microwaves, humming quietly in kitchens and satellites. Next, we reach infrared, the warm glow felt from a fire or the sun's gentle rays. Then, nestled in the middle, lies the visible spectrum, a rainbow of colors, from deep red to bright orange to soft yellow and green, then the calm blue, and finally, the delicate violet edge. This rainbow is all that human eyes can see. Beyond violet lies ultraviolet, hidden to us, but felt in the sting of sunburn. And further still, X-rays, then gamma rays, short and powerful, carrying immense energy. Each of these waves, radio, microwave, infrared, visible, ultraviolet, X-ray, gamma, is a different wavelength of light. Some are long, measured in meters. Some are short, smaller than the atoms themselves. Now imagine, if you wish to cloak an object, you must decide, cloak it from which wavelength? A cloak that hides something from microwaves, like the first experiments, may do nothing at all for visible light. A cloak that works for one color, like green, may fail completely for red or blue. This is the first quiet challenge. Invisibility is not about hiding from one kind of light. It is about hiding from them all. Let us drift deeper into why this challenge is so hard. Each wavelength of light behaves differently. Long waves, like radio waves, bend easily around buildings and mountains. That is why a radio signal can reach you even when you're indoors. Shorter waves, like visible light, do not bend so easily. A beam of sunlight cannot slip around a corner. It must shine directly. When scientists build metamaterials, they design their patterns to interact with one specific wavelength, like tuning a musical instrument to one precise note. If you strike a different note, the pattern no longer works. The cloak becomes broken. Imagine weaving a cloak that hides you from green light. To an observer bathed in green, you might vanish completely. But if they shine a red flashlight, you appear again, your invisibility broken by a change in wavelength. This makes the dream of a universal cloak far more difficult. It is not enough to bend one color. The cloak must bend them all, seamlessly, every shade of the rainbow, and beyond, from infrared to ultraviolet. It is as though you are trying to play not just one melody on a violin, but the entire orchestra, every instrument, every harmony, perfectly in tune. The complexity is immense. And yet, this is the task invisibility demands. Now, let us pause gently and ask, can this challenge ever be solved? Scientists have explored ideas called broadband cloaks. These are cloaks designed to work for many wavelengths at once, not just a single frequency. One approach uses layered metamaterials, each layer tuned for a slightly different wavelength. Stacked together, they create a cloak that covers a wider spectrum, like overlapping threads of color, woven into a stronger fabric. Another idea is adaptive materials, materials that can shift their properties, bending light differently depending on wavelength. These are still only theories, but they hint at a future where a cloak could change, moment by moment, to meet the light that falls upon it. And yet, the dream remains far away. Even the most advanced cloaks today can cover only narrow ranges, tiny objects, and only in controlled laboratory conditions. The challenge of wavelengths reminds us that invisibility is not a simple door we may walk through. It is a long corridor with many locks, each one tied to the nature of light itself. But even so, every time a new experiment cloaks one more wavelength, every time the rainbow of light bends just a little more, we step closer to a world where invisibility is not only imagined, but crafted carefully out of the spectrum itself. So when we think of invisibility, dear listener, let us remember the challenge of wavelengths and admire how light, in all its colors, guards its secrets carefully. It is this challenge that makes the dream so delicate and so wondrous. Dear listener, let us drift now into another gentle challenge that invisibility faces, the quiet but stubborn problem of angles and perspectives. When we look at an object, our eyes capture light reflected toward us, but another person, standing in a different place, sees the same object from a different angle. The object is the same, but the paths of light are different for every observer. Now imagine an invisibility cloak. It bends light so that from one direction, an object appears to vanish completely, but from the side or from above, the illusion may shatter. This is because cloaks, especially early designs, were built to hide only from a single perspective, like a stage trick in a theater. The magician's illusion works perfectly when you sit in the audience, but fails if you peek from behind the curtain. The world, however, does not have only one audience. It has many observers, each with their own angle. And so the cloak must do more than bend light in one direction. It must guide it in all directions simultaneously. This is one of invisibility's greatest challenges, to hide not just from one pair of eyes, but from the infinite possibilities of perspective. Let us float deeper into why this matters. When you stand in a room, light floods in from many sources. A lamp may glow in the corner. Sunlight may spill from the window. Each beam strikes objects at a slightly different angle. For you to see invisibility, the cloak must redirect every one of these beams, not just the ones in front, but those coming from the side, above, and behind. This is extraordinarily complex, because each angle of incoming light is slightly different. The cloak must adjust to bend them all, so that they emerge seamlessly, as though nothing were ever there. Think of it like weaving a net for raindrops. If the net catches drops from one direction, it seems perfect, but if rain falls from another angle, the drops slip through. Invisibility cloaks work the same way. Early experiments succeeded in making objects vanish, but only when the observer stood at just the right angle. Move a little to the side, and the hidden object appeared again. For true invisibility, the cloak must work from every perspective, from the front, from the side, from above, and even when the observer moves quickly around it, the cloak must respond instantly, perfectly, to the shifting dance of light and sight. This challenge, quiet but immense, is one of the main reasons invisibility remains a dream, more than a reality. Now let us dream softly of how science may solve this. Researchers have imagined cloaks built not in 2 dimensions, but in full 3-dimensional space. Instead of bending light along one plane, the cloak would curve light around in every direction, like a bubble of emptiness. This requires metamaterials that are even more precise, patterns arranged in all dimensions, not just layered in flat sheets. A cloak like this would be less like a curtain and more like a sphere of flowing light. Other ideas explore active cloaks. Instead of passively guiding light, an active cloak would sense incoming beams and adjust itself in real time, changing its properties moment by moment, like a chameleon that does not just match its background, but matches the perspective of each observer. Such technology remains far away, but even the thought of it reveals the subtle beauty of the challenge, because invisibility at its heart is not only about bending light, it is about doing so for every possible eye, every possible angle, without error, without hesitation. To imagine this is to imagine perfection, a cloak that erases perspective itself, leaving only the illusion of untouched space. And so, dear dreamer, the problem of angles reminds us of how delicate invisibility truly is. It is not enough to vanish from one point of view. To be invisible is to vanish from all, a challenge vast and quiet, but one that continues to inspire scientists to weave ever finer cloaks in pursuit of the dream. Dear dreamer, so far we have wandered gently through stories, through light, through early experiments, and into the delicate problems of wavelengths and perspectives. Now, let us rest for a moment with a quieter question. Even if invisibility works for small objects, how do we make it work for larger ones? This is a challenge of scaling up invisibility. The truth is, almost all successful cloaks so far have been tiny, no larger than a grain of sand, or a microscopic chip of material. They work beautifully, but only for objects that are themselves invisible to the naked eye. Why is it so hard to make a larger cloak? The reason lies in the patterns of metamaterials. These patterns must be smaller than the wavelength of the light they control. For visible light, this means features just a few hundred nanometers across, thinner than a strand of spider silk, smaller than a single red blood cell. To cloak a pebble, you need billions of these patterns, woven with unimaginable precision. To cloak a person, you would need trillions upon trillions, a structure more intricate than anything we can currently build. This is why invisibility begins small. The science works, the principles are true, but scaling it up into the everyday world is like trying to weave a tapestry of stars with threads of moonlight. Let us drift deeper into the world of engineering. Imagine for a moment that you are asked to build a cloak for a cat. The cloak must cover every angle of its body, bend every wavelength of light, and remain flexible as the cat moves. You would need to create a fabric made of metamaterials, with structures far smaller than dust, spread across every fold and curve. Even making a flat sheet of metamaterial, large enough to cover a coin, is already a major challenge in laboratories today. Scaling that to a flexible, wearable fabric is beyond current technology. The difficulty grows with every increase in size. Errors in the microscopic structure add up, distorting the path of light, creating ripples and glimmers that betray the cloak. This is the central problem of scaling. The larger the cloak, the more perfect its structure must be. And perfection at this tiny scale is one of the hardest things humans can attempt. Some scientists have suggested using nanofabrication techniques, borrowed from the semiconductor industry, to print metamaterial cloaks layer by layer. Others dream of self-assembling materials, where the cloak could build itself at the molecular level, like crystals forming naturally in a cave. But for now, the dream remains delicate. Each attempt reveals new possibilities, but also new difficulties. Now, let us drift softly into the future and imagine how scaling invisibility might one day succeed. One approach is partial cloaking. Instead of making an entire person invisible, a cloak might hide only certain parts, like shielding a vehicle from radar or making a soldier less visible to infrared. These partial cloaks are already closer to reality and maybe stepping stones to something greater. Another approach is directional cloaking. A cloak might work from one angle or a narrow range of perspectives, but still cover larger objects. For example, an aircraft might be hidden from detection satellites above, even if it remains visible from the ground. And then there are dreams of full 3D adaptive cloaks. These would be fabrics that shift constantly, their microscopic structures reconfiguring in real time to cloak larger areas and moving bodies. Such cloaks will require breakthroughs in nanotechnology, computing, and material science, but they are not impossible. Scaling invisibility reminds us that size matters deeply. What works for a grain of dust does not easily scale to a stone, or a person, or a building, and yet every technology begins this way. The first computers filled entire rooms, and now they rest in our pockets. The first airplanes struggled to rise above the ground, and now we fly across oceans. So too may invisibility grow, from tiny cloaks in laboratories to larger ones that shimmer faintly into reality. The problem of scaling is vast, but it is not the end of the story. It is only another chapter in the slow unfolding of the dream. My dear listener, as we float deeper into the quiet mystery of invisibility, it is soothing to remember that science does not leap suddenly to the impossible. It drifts slowly from one small success to another, like stepping stones across a calm and endless river. When we think about invisibility today, we might imagine grand cloaks that make entire people vanish. But in truth, the near future is gentler, smaller, more practical. Already, scientists are exploring cloaks that bend not visible light, but other kinds of waves, like microwaves, sound waves, or even vibrations. These cloaks are easier to create because the wavelengths are longer and the structures needed to bend them are not so impossibly tiny. One possible use is in architecture. Imagine a building that seems to disappear. From radar scanning the city skies, not for trickery, but for protection. A tower that cannot be easily targeted, or a structure that blends more gently into its surroundings. Another near-future step may be in medicine. Tiny cloaking devices could be used to hide surgical tools from the body's immune system, making procedures safer, gentler, less invasive. Or nanocloaks might help scientists study living cells by shielding their instruments from disturbing delicate tissues. And, of course, there's the world of military research, where invisibility has always been a tantalizing dream. Aircraft, ships, or vehicles that seem to fade against the horizon, at least to certain sensors. These are not fairy tale cloaks, but they are practical, and they may arrive sooner than we expect. The first steps of invisibility are humble ones, and yet each brings us closer to the grander dream. Let us wander further and imagine how cloaking could be used not to vanish entirely, but to blend more gently with the world around us. Think of camouflage, that ancient technique humans and animals alike have used for survival. The tiger's stripes, the owl's feathers, the soldier's painted uniform. Cloaking may be thought of as the next step in camouflage. Instead of simply matching colors, it could bend light itself, so that the eye sees nothing but the background. A soldier might wear a thin layer of metamaterial. That makes them harder to spot at night. A vehicle might cloak itself only from above to vanish against the earth when seen from a drone. But blending need not be for war alone. Artists may one day use cloaking to create sculptures that shift between visible and invisible states, like ghosts of glass, half there, half gone, and cities might weave cloaking into their very design. Imagine a skyline where certain structures fade softly into the evening, making space feel larger, lighter, more peaceful. A building could hide its mechanical equipment, the wires, the pipes, the machinery, beneath cloaking layers, so that only beauty remains visible. This is a gentler future for invisibility, one where cloaks do not make us vanish into shadows, but instead let us live more harmoniously with the shapes of our surroundings. Now let us dream further still, into the soft horizon of what might be. One near-future use of invisibility may be in transportation, not for making whole cars or planes vanish, but for reducing their visibility to sensors. Cloaking parts of a plane from radar might make flights safer or more private. Cloaking portions of vehicles might help them navigate without disturbing wildlife, slipping quietly across the land. Another possibility lies in energy and efficiency. Cloaks could be designed not to hide objects from the human eye, but to redirect heat or light. A solar panel might cloak its supports, leaving only the energy-collecting surface exposed. A building might cloak its windows to stay cooler in the sun without blocking the view. Even in the digital world, there may be cloaks. Scientists are experimenting with acoustic cloaks, which could shield rooms from unwanted noise. Imagine a bedroom where city traffic is gently bent away so that silence surrounds you, like a blanket of air. All of these are not distant science fiction, but steps just beyond the horizon. They do not promise wizards vanishing into the night, but practical, quiet improvements to medicine, to architecture, to art, to comfort. The near-future uses of invisibility will likely surprise us, not with magic, but with subtle shifts that make our lives feel calmer, smoother, a little more wondrous. And so we see that invisibility is not only a dream of fantasy, but a set of tools waiting quietly in tomorrow's hands. Dear dreamer, as we float together toward the end of our journey tonight, let us return gently to the heart of invisibility itself. It began not in laboratories, not in equations or machines, but in dreams, from the myths of ancient Greece, where gods walked unseen among mortals, to the fairy tales of cloaks that vanish their wearers, to the novels and films that stir our curiosity even today. Imagination is the soil from which science often grows. Before a scientist asks, "How might this work?" a dreamer first whispers, "What if it could?" The idea of invisibility is a perfect example of this balance. It was once pure fantasy, the stuff of bedtime stories and playful wonder. And yet, over centuries, patient minds have carried the dream into reality, bit by bit. Even now, when scientists speak of metamaterials, of bending light, of partial cloaks and radar invisibility, they are still guided by that ancient whisper, the dream of becoming unseen. This is the first balance, dear friend, between imagination and science. One plants the seed, the other tends the garden. But let us drift further into the quiet truth that science, though powerful, has its limits. To cloak an entire human from every wavelength of light, from every angle, at every moment, is still far beyond what we can do. It may remain impossible, at least in the sense of the fairy tale cloak. And perhaps that is a gentle reminder that not every dream must be fully realized. Sometimes the pursuit of a dream is more beautiful than its completion. Invisibility has already given us so much. Even without a perfect cloak, it has inspired new materials, new ways of thinking about light, and new tools for medicine, for safety, for comfort. It has stretched human creativity and expanded what we believe is possible. In this way, science and dreams live in balance. Dreams remind us to reach farther, and science reminds us that the journey itself has value, even if the destination is never fully reached. The balance lies in accepting both, the wonder of imagination and the quiet boundaries of reality. And now, as our thoughts grow softer, let us look gently to tomorrow. Perhaps one day, children will grow up in a world where cloaks of partial invisibility are as ordinary as smartphones, or where buildings shimmer in and out of sight, like reflections on water. Or perhaps invisibility will remain, always just beyond our grasp, an eternal mystery, a reminder that not all dreams must be captured to be cherished. Either way, invisibility has already woven itself into our collective story. It is a bridge between fantasy and physics, between bedtime tales and careful experiments. And so, dear friend, as you rest now, know that the dream of invisibility is alive in the world, not only in laboratories, but in the quiet wonder of your own imagination. May your night be peaceful, your dreams gentle and bright, and your heart warmed by curiosity. Until we meet again, I wish you comfort. I wish you rest. I wish you good night. Good night, dear listener, and goodbye,